I once had a beautiful life, my own business, respect in the community, a house I dreamed of, and a son I was proud of. Now all I have left is the money from selling the business and the house. And you know what? They don't think I owe even that to myself, but to luck. Today I woke up at 6 in the morning, like I've done for the last 30 years. Old habits don't die, even when you sell your life's work. For 15 years, I got up at the crack of dawn to check the plant nursery before I started my workday. Another 15 to oversee a staff of 20 employees and a multitude of client projects. My company, Green Horizon, was a leading company in Walnut Creek and the surrounding area. 20 years ago, wealthy homeowners considered it prestigious to commission landscape design from Beatrice Hampton, and then word of mouth did the trick. I grew the business myself from a small nursery that I started with a dozen plants in my parents' old barn. 3 years ago, I decided that at 65, it was time to take a break. I sold the company for a sum that would give me a secure old age. I thought I'd travel, visit museums and concerts. I'd return to my passion for ceramics, which I'd abandoned when things started to pick up. Instead, I became an ATM for my own son and his wife. I opened the blinds. Outside the window was a manicured garden with ornamental maples, hedges, and an alpine slide that I had designed myself. It was my last project before selling the business, the most personal one. But even my own garden wasn't bringing me the joy I expected. The phone vibrated on the bedside table. "Mom, did you remember the mortgage payment? The due date is tomorrow." Lawrence, my only son, whom I'd raised alone after his father decided family life wasn't for him. This message didn't even begin with a greeting, just a reminder about money. 3 years ago, Lawrence met Shiva, and I thought he'd finally found his soulmate. He'd always been a soft, compromising boy. I worried that he would never meet a woman who would appreciate his kindness. Shiva seemed perfect, beautiful, confident, with ambition. I was so happy for them that when they talked about buying a house, I didn't hesitate to offer to pay the down payment. "It will be my wedding present," I said at the time. What I didn't specify was that the wedding gift was not to turn into monthly mortgage payments. But somehow it did. First, they asked for help, just this month, because Lawrence was waiting for a promotion and Shiva was moving to a new job. Then there was a temporary financial hole because of roof repairs. Then Shiva wanted a new car because her co-workers drive these. I reread my son's message and put my phone away. I'll do the translation later. Just like every month for the last 3 years. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the kitchen. My coffee maker was programmed for 6:30, another habit from a past life. I went downstairs, poured myself a cup, and sat at the kitchen table overlooking the backyard. This was my morning routine. Half an hour of silence before the world demands my attention. My house, a one-story ranch in the old part of Walnut Creek, was too big for one person. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a living room with a fireplace, and a spacious kitchen. I bought it 20 years ago when the business started making a serious profit, thinking that one day grandchildren would be running around here. Now it's just a space in which my footsteps echo. Lawrence and Shiva live in a new neighborhood on the other side of town. A big 2-story house with 3 bedrooms, a hot tub, and a home theater. Too big and expensive for a young couple with no kids, but Shiva insisted. "We need space for the future," she said then. "A future I'm paying for." The phone vibrated again, this time a message from Shiva. "Beatrice, the girls and I are going to the spa next weekend. Could you wire me some money? I want to surprise them and pay for everything." The girls are her co-workers at the advertising agency, where Shiva works as a digital marketing manager. Young women with perfect hair and flawless manicures who look at me like a museum piece when we happen to cross paths. I've seen pictures of them on Shiva's social media accounts. They regularly go out to restaurants, spas, and exhibitions. And I seem to be paying for some of that entertainment. I set the cup on the table with such force that the coffee spilled out onto the tablecloth. I didn't answer it. Instead, I opened the bank app on my tablet. In the last 3 months, I'd transferred nearly $80,000 to Lawrence and Shiva. Mortgage, car insurance, new living room furniture, a vacation to Hawaii. The list was endless. And that wasn't counting the small expenses that Shiva periodically asked me to cover. I closed the app and took a deep breath. When had this started? When did I go from being the mom my son was proud of to the ATM machine they use? After my divorce from Lawrence's father 30 years ago, I vowed my son would never need anything. I worked 16 hours a day building a business, denying myself everything so he could get the best education possible. Private school, summer camps, college without student loans. I wanted him to have opportunities that I didn't have. Lawrence grew up kind and caring. He always called, came over for Sunday dinners, helped with heavy bags. But after he met Shiva, something changed. At first, imperceptibly, he started calling less often, canceling our appointments more often. Then his concern turned into condescension. Mom, are you sure you can handle this on your own? You shouldn't be gardening at your age. Maybe you should sell the house and move to something smaller. And then the hints about money started. At first cautious. Mom, you realize we're just starting out. It's hard for us. Then more direct. Mom, you don't need all this money from the sale of the business. You're alone and we're building a family. Shiva was more direct. During one of the rare dinners at their house, she asked how much I got for the company. When I dodged the question, she laughed. Beatrice, we are a family. We shouldn't have secrets from each other. That evening, after her third glass of wine, she said something she had probably been thinking for a long time. You're just lucky to have this business. You can't build something like this nowadays. There's too much competition. You've come to the right place at the right time. Lawrence didn't say anything, didn't defend me, didn't remind my wife of the years of hard work, the sleepless nights, the risks I'd taken, about how I'd bounced back after the economic crisis of 2008, when luxury services like landscaping were no longer a priority for most clients. That night I cried for the first time in years. A knock on the door snapped me out of my memories. I looked at the clock. 8 in the morning. Who could have come so early? Lawrence stood on the doorstep wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. He looked tense. Mom, I've been calling you. Why didn't you answer? I looked at the phone. 3 missed calls. I'm sorry, I was thinking. Is something wrong? He walked past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. Did you see my message about the mortgage? Yeah, I was going to make the transfer today. He exhaled a sigh of relief and sat down at the kitchen table. Can you do it now? The bank sent a reminder. I sat down across from him, feeling the irritation building inside me. Lawrence, did you come at 8 in the morning to ask me to wire money? He shrugged with the carelessness he'd had since marriage. I'm on my way to work. Your house is on the way. Thought it would be easier to stop by than to call. Easier for who? He didn't notice the bitterness in my voice. Mom, you know what the market is like right now. Accountants are being laid off everywhere. This is the 3rd round of layoffs at my company. I'm lucky I'm hanging in there. What about that promotion you were talking about last year? He looked away. Thomas got it. He has more experience. Is that why you and Shiva decided to go to Hawaii? To celebrate you not getting the promotion? It was Shiva's idea. She said I needed to relax and get my strength back. Besides, it was our wedding anniversary. I looked at my son in silence. When did he become so, unresponsive? So indifferent to how I felt? You know, Lawrence, I've been through some tough times in business, too. There were times when I didn't know how I was going to pay for your school next month. But I never asked my parents for money. I found solutions. You always mention that. He grumbled. Your hard road to success. But times have changed, Mom. It's much harder for the young now. Is that why you live in a house you can't afford? Is that why Shiva changes his car every 2 years? Is that why you fly to Hawaii when you're afraid of losing your job? Lawrence stood up, his face flushed. I'm not asking you to understand our lifestyle. I'm just asking you to help with the mortgage, like you've been doing for the last 3 years. If it's difficult for you, say so. It's not difficult for me, Lawrence. I'm hurt. Hurt. He seemed genuinely surprised, offended that you're helping your own son, that you're supporting our family. Mom, you have more money than you can spend for the rest of your life, and we're just getting started. I looked at him and I didn't recognize him. This wasn't my boy who cried when he accidentally broke a flower in my nursery. Not the teenager who had worked part-time over the summer to buy me a birthday present. Okay, I said finally. I'll do the transfer. But we need to have a serious talk about the future, Lawrence. Sure, Mom. He smiled with relief. Maybe next Sunday? Come to our house for dinner. Shiva's making his signature lasagna. I knew Shiva had never made lasagna in his life. They order it from the Italian restaurant on the corner of their street. But I nodded. Lawrence kissed me on the cheek, hurriedly, formally, and left. I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the cooled coffee and thinking about how it had come to this. In the evening, I got a text from Shiva reminding me about the money for the spa weekend. And a picture. Her and her girls from last time. Shiva in the center, in a silk robe with a glass of champagne, the others around her like an entourage. She looked happy, confident, as if the whole world belonged to her. In a way it did, at least the part of it that I was paying for. I opened my account and checked my balance. The numbers on the screen confirmed that I could live comfortably for years to come. Traveling, pursuing hobbies, helping those who really needed it. Instead, I was funding a lifestyle that my son and his wife couldn't afford, and one that they weren't even grateful for. Something inside of me broke at that moment. Some last thread tying me to the image of a caring mother who would always come to the rescue. I transferred the money for the mortgage, for the last time I decided at the time, but I ignored Shiva's request for a spa weekend. It was time to make a change. And I decided to start small, learning to say no. My new decision lasted exactly 4 days. On Wednesday, I got a call from Lawrence. Mom, what's going on? His voice sounded irritated. Shiva says you haven't responded to her message about the money. I was sitting in my workshop, which I had set up in my former office, with a lump of clay in my hands. For the first time in a long time, I felt a creative high, imagining how I would turn this shapeless lump into an elegant vase. My son's call shattered my concentration. I've decided I'm not paying for her spa weekend with her friends, I said calmly. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Lawrence sighed with that peculiar intonation he'd developed in recent years, a mixture of weariness and condescension. Mom, this is important to her. Shiva works hard. She needs to relax. And I need to control my expenses, I parried. Control your expenses? He laughed unhappily. You sold the business for millions. What expenses are you talking about? I put the clay on the potter's wheel and wiped my hands on my apron. The ones I make on you two every month. Mortgage, insurance, vacations. Now the spa too. It's getting too much, Lawrence. Too much? His voice has risen. Mom, I'm your only son. Who else are you going to leave your money to? To your cats? I don't have cats, Lawrence. That's a figure of speech. He was clearly losing his patience. Look, Shiva's upset. She already promised the girls this weekend. You're embarrassing her. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. I took a deep breath. Okay, I'll wire the money this time, but we need to have a serious talk about our financial relationship. Sure, he agreed quickly, and I could almost see his relieved smile. By the way, did you remember that Shiva's birthday is in 2 weeks? We made reservations at the Amethyst. Amethyst was the most expensive restaurant in Walnut Creek, a place where dinner for 3 easily cost 3 zeros. And you expect me to pay for that? I asked bluntly. Well, it's tradition, right? There was an ingratiating note in his voice. You've always thrown us birthday dinners. Indeed, I'd always celebrated Lawrence's birthdays in nice restaurants. And after his marriage, the tradition was extended to Shiva. But before, it was my choice, my gift. Now they were just confronting me. Okay, I said, feeling tired. 7 o'clock tonight? 8 o'clock. Shiva finishes late that day, and Mom, he hesitated. Couldn't you wear something, decent? Last time your outfit was a little... I didn't let him finish. What was wrong with my outfit, Lawrence? Nothing. It's just that Shiva says in a restaurant like this, you have to match the atmosphere. You know how she has an eye for detail. I remembered my outfit from the last dinner, an elegant black dress I'd bought at a boutique on Rodeo Drive on a trip to Los Angeles 5 years ago. A dress from a famous designer that cost more than Shiva's monthly salary. But apparently it wasn't fancy enough by her standards. I'll think about your offer, I said coldly. Bye, Lawrence. After this conversation, I could not go back to work with clay. My hands trembled with restrained anger. I transferred the money to Shiva enough for a week's vacation, let alone a day at the spa, and went out into the garden, hoping that working with plants would calm my nerves. The next 2 weeks passed in tense anticipation. Shiva gave no thanks for the money, but posted dozens of photos of her spa weekend on social media. Some of them showed champagne and treatment bills, some with 2 zeros carelessly left on the tables next to the glasses. She wanted everyone to see how expensive her lifestyle was. The day before the planned dinner, Lawrence stopped by my place after work. It was a Thursday, an unusual time for a visit. He was usually too busy on weekdays. "Mom, do you have a minute?" he asked, shuffling nervously from foot to foot in the hallway. I led him into the kitchen and offered him coffee. He declined. "I wanted to talk about tomorrow night," he started, avoiding my eyes. "Shiva is really looking forward to this dinner. She is turning 32, a milestone." "Why 32 is a milestone?" I was surprised. "Well, it's an important age for a woman." He was obviously repeating someone else's words. "Anyway, I was wondering, could you get her something special this year?" I raised an eyebrow. "Special?" "Yeah, you know." He finally looked at me. "She really likes the earrings at the jewelry store on Main Street, the ones with the diamonds and sapphires." I knew that store. I knew what kind of earrings she was talking about. They started at $15,000. "Lawrence, are you asking me to buy your wife earrings for $15,000? Actually, they cost $18,000, he corrected me. "But that's not a problem for you, is it? You always said you wanted me to be happy, and Shiva will be very happy." I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where was the boy who cried when he spent my $20 on a video game without asking? That teenager who worked part-time during the summer so he wouldn't have to ask me for money for a new bike? "What are you going to give her yourself?" I asked. He blushed slightly. "Yeah, I have plans, but you know our situation, Mom. I can't afford such expensive gifts." "Is that why you want me to give them? But you were going to give something anyway, weren't you?" He shrugged. "So why not something she'd actually like?" I shook my head slowly. "Lawrence, I'm not buying those earrings. I'd already agreed to pay for dinner at the Amethyst, and that was enough." His face changed, becoming stiffer. "You're getting stingy, Mom. Money changes you." "No, Lawrence. What changes me is the way you and Shiva treat that money, as if it's your right to spend what I've earned all my life." "Earned?" he snorted. "Let's be honest. You got lucky with this business. You were in the right place at the right time. You can't build something like this now." I heard Shiva echoing in his words. She's the one who led him to believe that my success was just luck, that years of labor, risk, sleepless nights meant nothing. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "Good." He stood up. "So this is how you feel about your family now. Shiva was right about you." "What exactly did Shiva say about me?" I stood up too, feeling the blood rush to my face. "That you were jealous of her, her youth, her beauty, her successful career. That it's hard for you to see me love another woman more than you." I stood there, stunned by those words. They hurt more than any insult. "Is that what you think of me? That I'm jealous of your wife? Aren't you?" He looked at me with defiance. "You're always criticizing her, judging our lifestyle, refusing to help." "Refuse to help?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Lawrence, I'm paying your mortgage, your cars, your vacations, your spa days. What else do you call help?" "It's not about the money, Mom." He raised his voice. "It's about your attitude. You're giving, but you look like you're doing me a favor. You don't even try to get to know Shiva better, to be friends with her." "I tried, Lawrence. For the first year after you were married, I invited her to dinners, offered to help her set up house, tried to find common interests. She was always politely cold. And then she started asking for money. First through you, then directly. And now she says I'm jealous of her?" Lawrence shook his head. "You know what? Forget it. I don't want to argue with you. I'll see you tomorrow at the restaurant. Don't be late." He left, slamming the door. I stayed in the kitchen, feeling a wave of anger and resentment building up inside. Does my son really believe that I'm jealous of his wife? That I'm motivated by jealousy rather than concern for his future? I didn't sleep well that night. I was haunted by thoughts of tomorrow's dinner, of what Shiva would say or do, of how Lawrence would behave. Part of me wanted to cancel everything, citing illness or urgent matters. But the other part, The part that had built a business from scratch and never backed down in the face of adversity, knew I had to go and face it head on. In the morning, I went to the mall and bought a new dress. Navy blue with silver trim, elegant and expensive. May Shiva not be able to pick on my appearance. I also bought a gift for her, a silk scarf from a famous designer. Not the 18,000 earrings, of course, but a decent gift. In the evening, I spent more time than usual on my makeup and hair. I wasn't going to give Shiva an excuse to make condescending comments about women of a certain age who stop looking after themselves. She liked to make such remarks in Lawrence's presence, ostensibly in jest. The mirror reflected an elegant woman with silver strands in her carefully styled hair, a straight posture and a proud look. A woman who had built a successful business, raised a son, and deserved respect. So why did I let them make me doubt myself? I picked up my phone and dialed the number of an old friend, Eleanor. We hadn't spoken in months, not since she tried to warn me that Lawrence and Shiva were using me. "B?" Her voice sounded surprised. "It's so good to hear from you." "Hi, Ellie," I smiled, feeling warm at the sound of her voice. "I'm sorry I haven't called in a while." "It's okay. I know you've been busy, with your family." There was no judgment in her tone, but I heard the unspoken question. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. It's Shiva's birthday tonight. We're going to Amethyst. And you're paying for dinner." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I sighed. "The usual." "B?" She paused, searching for words. "Remember what I said last time, about them taking advantage of your kindness?" "I remember." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "You were right. I just didn't want to see it." "And what's different now?" I told her about the recent events, the spa weekend, the earrings, what Lawrence had said. "Did he really say you were jealous of Shiva?" Eleanor was indignant. "That's ridiculous. You're 10 times more successful, intelligent, and interesting than that upstart." Her encouragement warmed my soul. "I'm tired, Ellie. Tired of feeling like an ATM machine. Tired of being disrespected, of my own son looking at me as an obstacle to his happiness. So, tell them that. Tonight, at dinner. I don't want to ruin Shiva's birthday." "Was she worried about your feelings when she asked for 18,000 earrings?" I remained silent as I pondered over her words. "What do you suggest?" "Be yourself, B. The woman who made the suppliers tremble if they didn't fulfill the terms of the contract. The one who never let a client fall behind on a payment. The one who built a business from scratch and sold it for millions. Stop playing the role of the obedient mommy who forgives everything." Her words hit something deep inside me. When did I become so soft, so fearful, so dependent on my son's approval? "You're right," I finally said. "Today will be different." "That's my girl." I could hear the smile in her voice. "Call me tomorrow and let me know how it went." After talking to Eleanor, I felt energized. She reminded me of who I really was, not just Lawrence's mother, not an ATM for Shiva, but Beatrice Hampton, a woman who was never afraid to stand up for herself. I walked over to my dresser and opened the jewelry box. I pulled out the diamond earrings and necklace I'd bought myself after a particularly successful year in business. They complemented the new dress perfectly. Let Shiva see that true success looks like this. At 7:30, I left the house and got into my car, not new, but a well-maintained premium sedan. On the way to the restaurant, I thought about the evening ahead. How much longer am I going to put up with disrespect? How much longer am I going to let them use me? And most importantly, what am I going to do about it? The answer came when I parked outside the Amethyst. I wasn't going to take it anymore. Tonight would be a turning point in our relationship. They're either going to start treating me with respect or they're going to stop getting my help. There will be no other options. With that thought in mind, I walked into the restaurant ready to meet my son and daughter-in-law face to face. The Amethyst restaurant glowed with purple and silver hues. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and the soft sounds of jazz created an atmosphere of luxury. A maitre d' in an impeccable suit met me at the entrance. "Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under the name of Lawrence Hampton." He checked his clipboard and smiled. "Your company is waiting for you. Let me show you to your table." We walked through the main hall, past tables occupied by wealthy Walnut Creek residents. I noticed a couple of local business owners who had been my clients in the past. They nodded politely at me. Lawrence and Shiva sat at a table in the corner overlooking the patio. Shiva looked stunning in a champagne-colored dress, her hair gathered into an elaborate updo, her makeup flawless. Lawrence sat next to her in a dark suit and blue tie that had been my present last Christmas. "Mom, you're late," Lawrence said instead of greeting me, glancing at his watch. "Just 5 minutes, dear." I smiled and turned to Shiva. "Happy birthday, Shiva. You look beautiful." I held out a neatly wrapped gift to her. She took it with a polite smile but didn't open it. "Thank you, Beatrice. You too. Looking good for your age." I ignored the shot and sat down at the table. The waiter came over immediately, offering the menu and wine list. "We've already chosen the wine," Shiva said, pointing to a bottle in a silver ice bucket. "Lawrence, why don't you pour your mom one?" I glanced at the label. It was Montrachet Grand Cru, one of the most expensive white wines in the world, clearly not something Lawrence and Shiva could afford on his accountant's salary. Lawrence filled my glass, then Shiva's, and finally his own. Shiva raised her glass for a toast. "To me and my special day," she smiled. We took a drink. The wine was excellent, but the thought that they had chosen it, knowing that I would be paying for it, kept me from enjoying it. "So," Lawrence began awkwardly, "how was your day, Mom?" "Productive," I replied. "I worked on a new ceramic vase, getting back into my old hobby." "Pottery?" Shiva pursed her lips. "Isn't that a little too mundane? A lot of people in my agency are into contemporary art, abstract painting, installations. Ceramics is one of mankind's oldest arts," I replied calmly. "There's something therapeutic about creating something functional and beautiful from a simple piece of clay." "I understand," she nodded. "At your age, it's important to have soothing activities." The waiter came over to take the order. Shiva studied the menu slowly, stopping at the descriptions of the most expensive dishes. "I'll have the foie gras as an appetizer," she began. "Then the lobster with truffle sauce and gratin potatoes on the side." Lawrence ordered oysters and Kobe steak, the second most expensive dish after the lobster. I opted for the asparagus cream soup and baked sea bass, delicious but relatively inexpensive. "And another bottle of this wonderful wine," Shiva added, pointing to the Montrachet. The waiter nodded and left. I felt irritation building up inside. They hadn't even asked if I wanted another bottle for that kind of money. It was just assumed that I would pay. "So Shiva," I decided to change the subject, "how is your new project at the agency going?" "Oh, it's been amazing," she perked up. "We launched a campaign for a cosmetic brand and the results exceeded all expectations. The director personally thanked me at the general meeting." "Really?" I was genuinely interested. "And what strategies did you use?" Shiva started talking about the target audience and performance indicators. As she talked, I noticed some inconsistencies in her story. "Sounds standard," I remarked when she finished. "When I ran my business, we were always looking for unconventional approaches. It helped us stand out from the competition." Shiva's face tensed slightly. "Beatrice, marketing a landscape design and promoting a cosmetic brand are completely different things. Modern digital marketing requires specialized knowledge." "Absolutely," I agreed. "But the basic principles remain the same: understanding the needs of the client, creating a unique offer, effective communication." "Maybe it worked in your time," Shiva emphasized on the word "in your time. "But things are moving much faster now. Methods that were effective 5 years ago are obsolete today." 3 years ago, I corrected her. "When I sold the company, we had a portfolio of millions of dollars worth of clients and a waiting list for 6 months." Lawrence coughed, clearly sensing the tension building. "Mom, not everyone can build a successful business like you," he said. "You're lucky you started at a time when the competition wasn't so fierce." "Lucky?" I looked at my son with surprise. "You think 25 years of hard work, risks, and sleepless nights is luck?" "That's not what I meant." He looked embarrassed. "It's just things are different now. Young professionals have to compete with global corporations." "I had to compete with established companies that had been around for decades," I countered. "No one gave me clients or contracts." The waiter arrived with our appetizers, and the conversation was temporarily interrupted. Shiva took up her portion of foie gras with apparent pleasure. Lawrence tasted the oysters cautiously, though I knew he wasn't a particular fan of them. By the way, Beatrice, Shiva blotted her lips with a napkin. I saw some stunning earrings at the jewelry store on Main Street, sapphires and diamonds in white gold. Lawrence said you wanted to give me a special gift for my birthday. I almost choked on my soup. So Lawrence had told her I was going to buy her those earrings, even after I bluntly refused? I already gave you a present, Shiva, I said, pointing to the unopened box. I hope you like it. Oh, of course. She looked at the box without enthusiasm. I'll open it later. But Lawrence said, let's not talk about that now. Lawrence interrupted her, visibly nervous. Mom, have you tried the new golf club that opened in the suburbs? When the appetizers were finished, the waiter brought a second bottle of expensive wine. Shiva immediately held out her glass for refilling. This wine is simply divine, she gushed. Our agency had a corporate party at the bodega last week, but even there was nothing like this. Our main courses arrived with theatrical presentation. Shiva's lobster was huge on a bed of exotic vegetables, drizzled with a thick sauce with visible chunks of black truffle. Lawrence's steak was served on a heated stone slab with an assortment of miniature garnishes. My sea base looked more modest, but the flavor was delightful. Dinner continued in a tense atmosphere. Shiva made remarks that teetered on the edge of propriety. Lawrence tried to smooth over sharp edges, and I tried to maintain my dignity. When it was time for dessert, Shiva chose the most expensive one on the menu: chocolate souffle with gold foil and rare cognac. Lawrence ordered a cheesecake with truffle honey. I limited myself to an espresso. Beatrice, you're not ordering dessert? Shiva was surprised. At your age, you don't have to watch your figure so much. I prefer coffee after dinner, I replied calmly. It's an old habit. When the desserts were served, Shiva took out her phone and started taking pictures of her souffle. For Instagram, she explained. My followers love that kind of content. How many followers do you have? I asked out of politeness. Almost 5,000, she smiled proudly. Mostly professionals from the marketing and design industry, a quality audience. Impressive, I said, though the number was pretty modest for someone who called herself an expert in digital marketing. And do you have a social media account, Beatrice? Only Facebook to keep track of old friends, I replied. I prefer real communication to virtual. Of course, she nodded with a slight chuckle. Your generation has always valued traditional ways of communication. I felt my patience running out. All evening, Shiva had methodically tried to humiliate me. My age, my experience, my accomplishments. And Lawrence sat by and let it happen. You know, Shiva, I said, sipping my espresso, I've noticed an interesting trend. The less confident a person is in their own accomplishments, the more they tend to belittle the accomplishments of others. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. That's a very interesting observation, Beatrice. And I've noticed that people often cling to past successes when their present isn't as fulfilling. Shiva, Lawrence began warningly, but she ignored him. It must be hard, she continued, looking me straight in the eye, to live alone, with no family around, no job that once defined you. Just existing day in and day out with no real purpose. Shiva! Lawrence raised his voice, but she raised her hand, stopping him. No, darling, I'm just trying to understand. How does it feel, Beatrice? She leaned forward, a challenge in her eyes. How does it feel to be a failure? The word hung in the air like a slap. Lawrence froze with his mouth open. There was a vacuum around us. The sounds of the restaurant faded away, and it was just the three of us, and the insult thrown in my face. I felt a wave of anger rise up inside me, but with it came a strange calm. It was as if I could finally see the situation with clarity. I slowly put the cup back on the saucer and looked at Shiva. Then I shifted my gaze to Lawrence, who sat with his eyes down, unable to meet my gaze. My son, who had allowed his wife to insult her own mother. And then I smiled, calmly, with dignity. I smiled the way I smiled at clients who tried to dictate terms to me without realizing who was really in control. How does it feel to find out that this loser won't be paying your bills anymore? Now it was Shiva's turn to freeze with his mouth open. Lawrence raised his head, his face expressing a mixture of shock and disbelief. What? What do you mean? He muttered. Exactly what I said. I continued to smile, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders with each word. No more mortgage payments, no more spa weekends, no more vacations in Hawaii, no restaurant bills with wine at $800 a bottle. You can't be serious, Shiva laughed nervously, but there was worry in her eyes. Why not? I shrugged. You said it yourself. I'm a loser, a lonely old woman with no purpose in life. Why do you need my help? Why do you need loser money? Mom, that's not what she meant, Lawrence began, but I raised my hand to stop him. No, Lawrence, that's exactly what she meant. And you know what? She helped me realize something important. I really was a failure because I let you two use me, because I was paying for a lifestyle you couldn't afford, because I was hoping to buy your love and respect. This is ridiculous! Shiva tried to maintain her arrogance, but her voice trembled. Your family. Families help each other. That's right, I nodded. Families help, but families also respect each other, appreciate. They thank each other. When was the last time you thanked me, Shiva? When was the last time you, Lawrence, didn't call me to ask for money? They were silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. You're on your own from now on, I said firmly, pulling out my wallet. I'll pay for this dinner because I promised, but this is the last time. You can't do that, Shiva blurted out, her face contorted with anger. You can't just give up your son. I am not giving up my son, I replied calmly. I refuse to be your ATM. Mom, please, Lawrence finally spoke, his voice trembling. Let's not make any hasty decisions. She didn't mean it. No, Lawrence, exactly. I stood up, placing the card on the table. The waiter will be here soon, and I have to go. You can't just leave, Shiva almost shouted, attracting the attention of the neighboring tables. We'll go bankrupt without your help. Do you realize that? Maybe you should have thought about that before you called me a loser. I gave her one last smile. Have a nice evening, and happy birthday again. I turned and walked toward the exit, ignoring Shiva's indignant exclamations and Lawrence's confused pleas to come back. I woke up the next morning with an unusual sense of lightness. It was as if overnight someone had removed from my shoulders the heavy backpack I'd been carrying for years. The first thing I did was mute my phone, knowing that Lawrence would call when he realized I was serious. And he did call. 6 missed calls in the time it took me to shower and make breakfast. 2 from Lawrence and 4 from an unknown number that I was sure belonged to Shiva. I didn't bother calling back. Instead, I sent my bank manager an email asking her to cancel all automatic payments to my son's account. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the back porch. The morning was clear, sunny, birds were singing in the garden, the breeze lightly swaying the branches of the Japanese maples I'd planted 5 years ago. I sat down in the wicker chair and for the first time in a long time just enjoyed the moment. The phone vibrated again. This time there was a message from Lawrence. Mom, we need to talk. Please call me back. I put the phone away. I needed time to gather my thoughts, to make sure I wouldn't back down at their first attempt to manipulate me. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I knew exactly who it was, but I looked through the peephole anyway. Lawrence stood on the doorstep, pale and anxious, wearing the same shirt as yesterday. It looked like he hadn't slept well. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Mom, he began, and his voice sounded strained. We need to talk about yesterday. I'm listening, I answered calmly. He looked around as if hoping I would invite him in. When he didn't, he shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. You're not serious about stopping the help, are you? It's just, emotional reaction to Shiva's words? I'm dead serious, Lawrence. His face has changed. There's fear in his eyes. But Mom, you can't. We have mortgages, loans. We were counting on you to help us. That's exactly the problem. I crossed my arms over my chest. You took my money for granted. No gratitude, no respect. And Shiva made it clear yesterday that she thought the world of me. That's not what she meant, he exclaimed. She was upset, had too much wine. Lawrence, I interrupted him, there is truth in wine. Shiva said what she really thinks, and you know it. He lowered his head, unable to object. Please, can I come in? It's cold standing on the threshold. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, like he did when he left after our fight a few days ago. But I'm not like him. I stepped back, letting him into the house. We made our way into the kitchen. I offered coffee, more out of habit than out of a desire to buy him a drink. He accepted, though it was obvious he didn't care for coffee. Mom, he started again when I placed the cup in front of him. I realized things got out of hand yesterday. Shiva shouldn't have said what she said, but you know how she is, impulsive, emotional. She didn't think. Did you? I asked her directly. When she insulted me, your mother, did you think to stop her? To protect me? He looked away, and that was the answer. Yeah, I was shocked. I didn't expect her to say that. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Shiva had been making snide remarks about my age, my accomplishments, my lifestyle for months, and you never once stopped her. Not once did you tell her that it was unacceptable. I didn't notice, he started, but I interrupted him. You didn't want to notice because it was convenient for you to get my money and ignore everything else. Lawrence jumped up, his face red with anger. That's not fair. I am your son. You're supposed to help me. Should I? I stood up too, looking him straight in the eye. I raised you alone without your father's help. I paid for your education, your first car, your wedding. I did everything I could for you. And now that you're 34 years old, I'm still supposed to help you? But you have money, he was almost shouting. You sold the business for millions. You don't need that money anyway. Don't need it? I shook my head. Lawrence, I've worked all my life to ensure a secure old age. I don't have to depend on anyone, including you. This money is the result of my labor, my risks, my sleepless nights, and I decide how I spend it. So you'd rather see your son go broke? His voice shook with resentment and anger. Like Shiva and I losing our home? Will that make you happy? No, Lawrence, I tried to speak calmly, though I was seething inside. Your ruin would not make me happy, but it doesn't make me happy that you're living beyond your means at my expense, that you take my money without showing an ounce of gratitude or respect. We are grateful, he exclaimed. We just don't show it the way you want us to. Really? I looked at him skeptically. Shiva is grateful when she calls me a loser? Are you grateful when you call me just to remind me about my mortgage payment? He couldn't come up with an answer, so I continued. Lawrence, it's time for you and Shiva to learn to live within your means. Sell the house you can't afford. Buy something that matches your income. Give up vacations to Hawaii and new cars every 2 years. It's called responsibility. You don't understand. He clenched his fists. We can't just change everything. We have a certain way of life, a certain social circle. A way of life you can't afford, I finished for him. And a social circle that seems to care more about your facade than who you really are. Lawrence stared at me with a mixture of anger and despair. So this is the final decision? You're just cutting us off? I'm not cutting you off as a son, I clarified more gently. I will always love you, Lawrence, but I will no longer fund your lifestyle. That is my final decision. He stood motionless for a few seconds, then turned abruptly and walked out of the kitchen. I heard the front door slam, and through the window I saw him almost jogging toward his car. I sank into a chair, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. It had been a difficult conversation, but a necessary one. I knew this was just the beginning, that Lawrence and Shiva wouldn't give up so easily, but I also knew that I wouldn't back down again. The rest of the day passed in a strange silence. No calls, no messages. It was like the calm before the storm. I used the time to get my finances in order. I canceled all automatic payments to Lawrence's and Shiva's accounts, closed the credit card they sometimes used, and made a list of all the money I'd given them over the past 3 years. The figure came out to be an impressive over $300,000. Money that could have gone to my travels, hobbies, charity, anything but funding their excesses. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, another doorbell rang. This time it was Shiva standing on the doorstep. She looked flawless as always. Perfect hair, makeup, stylish outfit, but her eyes were cold. Beatrice. She didn't waste time on greetings. We need to talk. Come in. I opened the door wider. I preferred to deal with everything at once rather than stretch the confrontation over weeks. Shiva walked into the living room but didn't sit down. She stood in the middle of the room, nervously rubbing the strap of her designer purse. Lawrence told me about your conversation, she began. I came to apologize for what I said yesterday. I was wrong to call you at that word. Her apology sounded fake, like a memorized text. Thank you, Shiva, I replied neutrally. I accept your apology. Good. She visibly relaxed. So, we can forget about this incident and go back to normal life? Back to normal? I looked at her in surprise. What exactly do you mean? Well, she shrugged as if it was obvious. You'll continue to help us with the mortgage and other expenses, and I'll be more respectful. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did Shiva really think that a simple sorry was enough for me to keep writing them checks? I'm afraid that's not how it works, I said calmly. My decision was not an emotional reaction to what you said. It was the result of much thought about our relationship and how you and Lawrence felt about me and my help. Shiva's face changed, the mask of politeness falling away, revealing anger. So you're seriously going to leave us unsupported? Just like that? Not just like that, I countered. After 3 years of funding your lifestyle without a single thank you. After countless condescending comments about my age, my career, my life. After you called me a loser at a dinner I paid for. That was stupid of me, I admit. She raised her voice. But you can't punish Lawrence for my mistake. He is your son. I'm not punishing anyone, Shiva. I just stopped giving you the money you take for granted. And Lawrence is just as responsible as you are. He never once stopped you from being rude to me. Not once did he thank me for the help I was giving. Shiva began to pace the room, her heels clacking on the parquet. You don't realize the position you're putting us in? We won't be able to pay the mortgage, we'll have to sell the house, change our lifestyle. Yeah, we might have to, I agreed. But that's normal. A lot of people live within their means. It's called responsibility. Responsibility? She stopped and looked at me with unconcealed rage. We're responsible people. We both work, pay taxes. Just because we accepted your help doesn't make us dependents. No, it doesn't, I agreed. What makes you dependents is that you can't live without that help, that you've built your life on money that doesn't belong to you. She opened her mouth to object but couldn't find the words. Finally, she blurted out, I told Lawrence that we shouldn't have relied on you, that we should have been independent. You did. I didn't hide my skepticism. Then why are you so upset now? Isn't this a chance to prove your independence? Shiva pressed her lips together, her face contorted with anger. You think you're so smart, so strong and independent? Let's see what you say when one day you're alone, sick, with no one to help you. If that day comes, I replied calmly, I will at least know that I didn't buy the help of my loved ones, that those around me are there because they care about me, not my money. Shiva stares at me for a few seconds, then abruptly turns around and heads for the exit. You're going to regret this, Beatrice, she said over her shoulder. Lawrence is your only son, your only family, and you are pushing him away because of your pride. No, Shiva, I objected. I'm not pushing Lawrence away. I just stopped buying his presence in my life. She slammed the door so hard that the glass in the windows rattled. I sank back into my chair, feeling the adrenaline drain away, leaving behind fatigue. 2 difficult conversations in one day. But I knew it was necessary. That this was just the beginning of the road to restoring a healthy relationship, or to ending it if Lawrence and Shiva couldn't accept the new rules. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was only 6 o'clock, and I knew immediately that something serious had happened. Lawrence's name popped up on the screen. Hello? I answered anxiously. Mom? His voice sounded choked like he was crying. Yeah, I need to talk to you. Can I come over? Of course, I agreed, alarmed by his tone. What's wrong? I'll tell you when I see you. I'll be there in half an hour. I dressed quickly and went down to the kitchen to make coffee. What could have happened? Had he and Shiva quarreled over money, or had something else happened? Exactly 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Lawrence looked awful, pale, red-eyed, in wrinkled clothes. He'd obviously been up all night. Come in, I let him in. What's wrong? He walked into the kitchen and sank down heavily on a chair. Shiva has left, he said quietly. She packed her things and left. Said she didn't sign up for a life of poverty. I froze with the coffee pot in my hand. What do you mean left? Where to? To his sister in San Francisco. He rubbed his face with his hands. She said she'd only come back if I could find a way to get us back to the way we were. If I could convince you to help us again. I slowly set the coffee pot down and sat across from my son. And you've come to ask me to do this? I asked bluntly. He looked up at me with a look of confusion. I don't know why I came here, Mom. I don't know what to do. Shiva says it's all your fault, that you're purposely ruining our marriage because you're jealous of her. And you believe that? My voice was quiet but firm. Lawrence was silent for a long time, staring into the space in front of him. Finally, he shook his head. Noon too. I don't. I know that. He hesitated, searching for words. I used you, Mom. Took your money without thinking about how you felt. I let Shiva speak disrespectfully to you. And now I'm paying for it. His words surprised me. I hadn't expected such a confession, such sudden honesty. Lawrence. I touched his arm gently. I didn't mean to ruin your marriage. I just wanted you to learn to live on your own, to respect me and my help. I know. He nodded without raising his eyes. But Shiva, she's used to a certain way of life. She's not ready to give it up. Are you? I asked him straightforwardly. Are you ready to live within your means? He was silent for a long time, then shrugged. I don't have a choice, do I? Without your help, without Shiva's paycheck, I can barely pay the mortgage, let alone everything else. You could sell the house, I suggested. Buy something more affordable, a fresh start. And lose Shiva. He grinned bitterly. She had made it clear that she wouldn't come back if we sold the house. Then maybe you should consider whether she really loves you and not your lifestyle, I said softly. Lawrence looked up at me with a look full of pain. You never loved her, did you? Not true, I objected. I wanted to love her. I wanted her to be part of our family, but she never gave me a chance. From the beginning, she only saw me as a source of money, not a person. He didn't argue, and that was more eloquent than anything I could say. What am I supposed to do now, Mom? He asked helplessly. I can't lose Shiva. I love her. It's your decision, Lawrence, I replied gravely. I won't tell you how to live your life, but I won't change my decision about financial aid. It's not healthy, not for me, not for you. He nodded, though it was obvious that it wasn't the answer he was hoping for. I understand. It's just, I'm scared, Mom. Scared of losing everything I have. Lawrence, I took his hand. You won't lose everything. You'll lose the house you can't afford, a car you can't afford, perhaps a wife who loves those things more than you, but you'll find yourself, your strength, your independence. He looked at me questioningly, but didn't object. We sat in silence while the untouched coffee cooled. Finally, Lawrence stood up. I have to go, to think about all this. Of course. I got up too. You can always come and talk, Lawrence. I'm your mother and I love you. That's not going to change, whether I pay your bills or not. He smiled weakly, and for a moment I saw in him the boy I had raised. Kind, sensitive, smart. The boy who had gotten lost somewhere along the way to adulthood. Thank you, Mom, he said quietly, and left. I stood at the window watching his car pull onto the road. My heart ached for my son, but at the same time I felt a strange calmness. For the first time in years, I was true to myself, to my principles. I no longer allowed myself to be used for fear of losing my only child. In the days that followed, I expected more calls, more visits, more attempts to manipulate me. But nothing happened. Lawrence didn't call. Shiva didn't show up on my doorstep with new accusations. The silence was strange, unfamiliar, but there was something liberating about it. I began to fill my days with the things I truly loved. I resumed working with clay, creating vases and sculptures in my little workshop, catching up with Eleanor and other friends she had neglected in recent years, worked in the garden, enjoying every moment in the fresh air. A week after Lawrence's last visit, I received a short message from him. Shiva is back. We have decided to sell the house. I have found an apartment I can afford. Shiva is not happy, but has agreed to give it a try. Thanks for your firmness, Mom. Maybe this was just what we needed. I reread the message several times, feeling tears come to my eyes, not from grief, but from relief. Maybe there was a chance that Lawrence would actually grow up, that he would find the strength to live within his means and build a relationship based on love, not money. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I went out into the garden and sat on a bench under a Japanese maple tree. The sun was shining through the carved leaves, creating patterned shadows on the ground. For the first time in a long time, I felt real peace, real freedom. I was no longer an ATM machine for ungrateful people. I was me, Beatrice Hampton, a woman who had built a business from scratch, raised a son, and was now finally living for herself. 4 months flew by like a day. I didn't realize how rich life can be when you finally start living for yourself instead of others. In early May, I embarked on a 2-week trip to Italy, a dream I'd been putting off for decades. First Rome with its ancient ruins and bustling squares, then Florence with its endless works of art, and finally Venice, where I had breakfast every morning in a little cafe overlooking the Grand Canal. I went to ceramics workshops, visited museums, tasted the local cuisine, and enjoyed every moment. Back home, I enrolled in a horticulture class at a local college. Not because I lacked knowledge after 25 years in landscape design, but because I wanted to be among people who shared my passion. There I met Helen and Victor, an older couple who, like me, had found a second wind after retirement. We began to meet often, either at the botanical gardens, at a cafe, or at someone's house for dinner. Eleanor joined us, sometimes her brother Thomas, a widower with kind eyes and a soft smile. Gradually, we formed a small but warm circle of friends with whom I could discuss books, travel, art, anything I was interested in that Lawrence or Shiva never cared about. I tried not to think about them, though sometimes it was difficult. Lawrence called once every 2 or 3 weeks, but our conversations were brief and superficial. He didn't mention his financial difficulties, and I didn't ask. Shiva didn't appear in my life at all, which was fine with me. In mid-July, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Sunday, 10 o'clock in the morning. Lawrence's name popped up on the screen. "Good morning," I answered, a little surprised to hear from him on his day off. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded strained. "How are you?" "I'm fine, thanks. I plan to work in the garden today, then meet some friends. How are you doing?" There was a pause, then he exhaled. "Not great, to be honest. Shiva and we're having problems." I sat up on the bed, suddenly alarmed. "What's wrong?" "We sold the house 2 months ago, like I told you. Moved into an apartment on the north side of town. It's much smaller, of course, and not in the most upscale neighborhood. Shiva. She's not coping with the change." "What do you mean she's not coping?" I asked cautiously. "She is constantly comparing our present life with the past. Complains about the neighbors, the size of the apartment, the fact that we can't afford restaurants and vacations anymore. Blames me for not being able to provide her with the lifestyle she's used to. We had a terrible row yesterday and she left to go to a friend's house. Said she didn't know if she was coming back." I sighed. Part of me felt sorry for my son, but another part of me couldn't help but think it was predictable. Shiva had always valued status and material goods more than relationships. "I'm sorry to hear that, Lawrence, but maybe you just need time to adjust to the new reality." "I'm not sure Shiva wants to adjust." His voice sounded broken. "She says she deserves better, that I let her down. By stopping using my mother's money?" I couldn't contain my sarcasm. "That's not exactly how she phrases it." He chuckled weakly. "But yeah, it was something like that." We were silent for a moment. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want my son's marriage to fall apart, but at the same time, I couldn't help wondering if it had been healthy in the first place. "Lawrence," I finally said, "I can't solve your problems. That's for you and Shiva to do. Perhaps you should see a marriage therapist." "We tried that," he sighed. "Shiva left in the middle of the second session when the therapist suggested she work on accepting our new financial situation." That sounded like Shiva. She always rejected any suggestion that didn't fit her ideas of how things should be. "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." He sounded lost. "Part of me wants to fight for our marriage at all costs, but the other part—" He was silent for a moment. "The other part wonders if it's worth fighting for a man who only loves you under certain financial conditions." I was surprised by his insight. Maybe these months had really made him grow up, take a more critical look at his life. "It's an important question," I agreed. and only you can answer it. I know. He paused. Anyway, I just wanted to talk to someone. Thanks for listening. Always, Lawrence, I'm here for you. After that conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about my son and his situation. Part of me felt guilty. If I'd kept funding them, maybe their marriage wouldn't have been jeopardized. But the other, more rational part of me realized that I would have only delayed the inevitable. Sooner or later, the truth about their relationship would have come out anyway. A week after that conversation, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting company and was surprised to see Shiva on the doorstep. She didn't look as flawless as usual. Makeup was minimal, her hair was in a simple ponytail, and her clothes were practical rather than fashionable. Shiva, I didn't hide my surprise. What do I owe you? May I come in? She asked, her voice sounding less confident than before. I led her into the house and we walked into the living room. Shiva sat down on the couch, looking around nervously, as if she were here for the first time, even though we used to have family dinners in this house. Beatrice, she began, picking her words. I've come to apologize for everything that happened, for the way I behaved. I sat down across from her, watching her face carefully. Shiva was never sincere in apologizing, and I doubted this time was an exception. It's unexpected, I said neutrally. The last few months have been difficult, she continued. Losing my house, moving into an apartment, changing my lifestyle. It's made me rethink a lot of things, to realize what's really important. And what is important, Shiva? I asked her bluntly. She sighed, looking at her hands. Family, relationships, those things that money can't buy. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. The words sounded right, but something in her tone made it hard for me to believe they were sincere. I was wrong to treat you the way I did, she looked up. Wrong to expect you to pay for our lifestyle. Wrong to call you that word at dinner. I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. Thank you, Shiva, I replied. I appreciate your words. But I have to ask, why now? Why did you decide to apologize after 4 months? She tensed slightly, but quickly regained her composure. As I said, the last few months have been a time of reflection. I miss being a family, what we used to have. We never had a real family relationship, Shiva, I objected softly. Right from the beginning, you saw me only as a source of finance. We were never close. It's my fault. She lowered her eyes in feigned remorse. And I'd like to change that. Start over. Maybe we could have lunch together once in a while. Get to know each other better. I stared at her carefully, trying to read her true motives. And then she made a mistake. Her gaze slid around the room for a moment, lingering on the antique clock on the mantel, the paintings on the walls, the expensive vase on the coffee table. I could almost see the catalog of valuables taking shape in her head. Shiva, I said calmly, let's be honest with each other. You didn't come to restore family relations. You came because you hope I will start funding you again. Her face contorted for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together. That's not true, Beatrice. I really want us to be a family. And that's why you threatened to leave Lawrence if he didn't find a way to restore your old lifestyle, I asked bluntly. She flinched, clearly not expecting me to know that. Lawrence, he told you about it? Her voice grew colder. Yes, we talk sometimes. He is my son, after all. Shiva tightened her lips, the mask of benevolence beginning to fall away. Then you must understand how hard it is for him, how hard it is for both of us. We've lost our home, our status, our friends. Real friends don't disappear when you move to a smaller apartment, I said. You don't understand, she shook her head. In our circle, a certain status is important, a certain way of life. Maybe you should reconsider your circle, I suggested. Find people who value you for who you are, not what you have. She looked at me with ill-concealed irritation. Lawrence and I can separate, do you realize that? She finally said. Your son will be unhappy, and it will be on your conscience. This is it, the last card, manipulation through guilt. If you break up, Shiva, it won't be because of me, I said firmly. It will be because your relationship is based on material values and not on love and respect. How dare you? She jumped up, her face contorted with anger. You know nothing about our relationship. I know enough, I said calmly. I know that you are threatening to leave my son if he doesn't provide you with a certain standard of living. I know that you didn't come here to apologize, but to try to manipulate me. And I know you don't love Lawrence the way he deserves. Shiva stood with her fists clenched, her face pale with rage. You're going to regret this, Beatrice. When Lawrence is alone, when he's unhappy, remember it's your fault. If you really love him, you will stay with him whether you live in a mansion or an apartment, I replied. If you don't, maybe it's better for him to find out now instead of through years of pretending. She stared at me for a few more seconds, then turned abruptly and left the room. I heard the front door slam, and through the window I saw her walking briskly to her car, the inexpensive small car that had replaced her old luxury sedan. I sank into the chair, feeling a strange mix of emotions: pity for my son, who would probably lose his wife, anger at Shiva for her manipulations, but most of all, the peace of knowing that I had done the right thing by not falling for her tricks. 2 days later, Lawrence called me. His voice sounded tired but strangely peaceful. Shiva's gone, he said without preamble. She packed her things and went to her sister's in San Francisco. She said she was going to file for divorce. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. You okay? Strangely enough, better than I expected, he paused. The last few weeks had been awful. Constant fighting, accusations, threats. I've been living on a powder keg. And now that she's gone, I'm relieved. Is that a bad thing? No, I said softly. It means your relationship is no longer healthy. Maybe it never was. She came to see you. It wasn't a question. Trying to convince you to start helping us again. Yes, I didn't deny it. And she was very unhappy when I refused. He sighed. That's what I thought. She came back very angry, yelling that you were destroying our family out of jealousy and greed. That I had to choose between her and you. And you did. I told her I wasn't going to choose. That she is my wife and you are my mother, and I want both of you in my life. But I also told her that I wouldn't ask you to finance us again. That we need to learn to live within our means. And she didn't accept that. I finished for him. She didn't. She said I was weak, that I couldn't stand up for her, that I couldn't give her the life she deserved. He grinned bitterly. You know, at some point I realized she was right. I really can't give her what she wants, and maybe it's better for both of us. I was surprised at his maturity, his ability to look at the situation objectively despite the pain. What are you going to do now? I asked. First, I'm going to get my finances in order. I can pay the rent myself, without her salary. Maybe I'll look for a new job, something with better prospects. Maybe I could come over for dinner on Sunday, if you don't mind. I'd be very glad to, I answered, feeling the tears come to my eyes. I'd be delighted, Lawrence. 2 more months passed after that conversation. September had turned the leaves into bright colors, and my garden looked like an artist's palette. I had recently returned from a trip to New England, where I had enjoyed the beautiful scenery and small towns with white churches and cozy cafes. Lawrence came over for dinner every Sunday. At first, our meetings were a little strained. Too many unspoken resentments and disappointments stood between us. But gradually, we found our way back to each other. We talked about his job. He had actually found a new one with better pay and growth prospects. My travels, the books we were reading, the news. He never asked for money, never hinted at financial hardship. And I watched him grow more confident, more relaxed each week. It was as if he had shed the weight he had carried for years. The weight of pretending, of living beyond his means, of the constant stress of having to maintain the facade. The divorce with Shiva had gone surprisingly smoothly. She wanted to end things quickly and move to Los Angeles, where she was offered a job at a major advertising agency. Lawrence didn't contest her demands for property division, the little they had left after selling the house and paying off debts. One Sunday evening, as we sat on the veranda with glasses of wine, inexpensive but nice, watching the sunset, Lawrence suddenly said, "You know, Mom, I have to thank you." For what? I wondered. For being firm, for not giving in to my manipulations, for making me grow up, even when I resisted with all my might. I stared at him, not believing my ears. This wasn't the spoiled boy who demanded money for earrings for his wife. This was a man who could admit his mistakes and learn from them. It wasn't easy, I admitted. Part of me wanted to just give you everything you asked for, just to make you happy. But I realized that real happiness couldn't be bought. You were right, he nodded. The whole time we were living on your money, I wasn't really happy. I constantly felt inadequate, unable to provide for my family on my own. And the more you gave, the worse I felt. Why didn't you ever talk about it? Because it was easier to take than to admit my inadequacy, he shrugged. And Shiva, she fueled it, convinced me that it was okay to take money from you, that you were going to leave it to me as an inheritance anyway, so why not use it now? I nodded, finally understanding the dynamics of their relationship. And now? Are you happy now? He hesitated, looking at the sunset. Not really. Divorce is painful, even if the relationship was unhealthy. But I feel, the potential for happiness. Like a door to a new life has opened in front of me. A life that belongs to me, not created by someone else's money. I squeezed his hand, feeling my heart fill with pride. My son was finally becoming the man I'd always hoped he would be. Strong, independent, able to learn from his mistakes. That evening after Lawrence left, I sat on the veranda for a long time, reflecting on the months that had passed. About the path I had traveled from a woman who allowed herself to be used by others to a man who could stand up for his own boundaries and principles. I thought about the money I had spent on myself instead of giving it to Lawrence and Shiva, about the travels that enriched my experiences and broadened my horizons, about new friends who valued me for who I am rather than what I can give, about a renewed passion for ceramics that brought me so much joy. But most of all, I thought about the inner peace I had found, about being able to wake up every morning with a sense of self-worth, knowing that I am living according to my values, freedom from manipulation and guilt. Over dinner 4 months ago, Shiva asked me, "How does it feel to be a failure?" Sitting on the veranda of my house, watching the stars appear in the evening sky, I smiled. Now I knew the answer. I was not a failure. I was a woman who had built a successful business, raised a son, who was finally finding his way despite the odds, created a circle of sincere friends, and lived a full, fulfilling life. A woman who found the strength to say no to toxic relationships and yes to self-respect. And that feeling was priceless. It couldn't be bought with money or gotten through someone else's approval. It came from within, from realizing my own worth and dignity. I took a sip of wine and raised my glass in a silent toast to my new life, to the freedom I had found, to the inner peace that was worth every second of the struggle.